know as a leader that you can be dampening or amplifying performance without even knowing that you're doing it. We often work with so many leaders that are trying their best to get the best out of their teams, but something is missing. They just can't quite figure out what it is. Now, what we know from science is that deep down in your subconscious mind, that's where the answers could be. Now, let me talk you through a bit of an example to show what's going on in each of our minds at that subconscious level. So I want you to imagine that you've been hand selected to go to a conference in Germany that's all about neuroscience and high performance. Now, you get your ticket and you realise that at the end of the year, you're going to be flying on New Year's Eve. And although it's a bit disappointing to be spending New Year's Eve on an aeroplane, the flight crew make it an unreal experience. So once you get onto the plane, even the pilot comes out and says hello to everyone. And once you arrive in Germany, you're straight into the conference. Now at the conference, you get to sit and listen to one of the leading neurosurgeons in the world talk about high performance, AI, and leadership. And you're sitting next to a leader that is a CEO of $1 billion company. It's an amazing experience. You get to meet so many different people. And after the first day of the conference, you all go out to one of the nice new bars in Germany. And you're having a couple of drinks, and in the corner, you see quite a few people gathered. They're actually celebrating an older couple who are celebrating their 50th anniversary. You think to yourself, well, one day, I'd love that to be me. Now we're going to zoom out of that scenario for a moment, and I just want to ask some questions. So once you got on the aeroplane, and I talked about the pilot, was the pilot a man or a woman? When you got to the conference and you heard the neurosurgeon speak, was the neurosurgeon a man or woman? And what race was he or she? The CEO of the $1 billion company, was that someone in a wheelchair? And once you went out and saw the couple celebrating their 50th anniversary, were they a gay couple? Now, the reason why you thought of certain people in those roles come down to what we call mental maps. So each and every one of us have mental maps, and they're guided by our experiences in the past and what we see on the news, what we have experienced by authority figures and what they've told us. And they build up these mental maps in our mind. Now, often when we tell that story, a lot of people might imagine a male pilot, a male neurosurgeon. The person, the CEO next to them, is certainly not in a wheelchair, and the couple is usually a straight couple. And that's because of the mental maps that we have built through experience. Now, the great thing with these mental maps is they're shortcuts. Our brain creates shortcuts at a subconscious level, and it allows us to conserve a lot of energy. If we had to think through every new experience, it would be extremely fatiguing. These mental maps are fantastic from an energy conservation point of view. On the other hand, they can create biases that can cause us to make mistakes and ultimately impact performance. Now, let's break down these biases a little bit. Biases, implicit bias, it's made up of 3 building blocks. The first is stereotypes. Stereotypes are an overgeneralized belief about a group of people. Now, they often have a kernel of truth associated with them. The problem is when we apply that kernel of truth to all members of the stereotype. As an example, a stereotype about men and women could be that men are less emotional than women. Now, research would suggest that as a whole, men are less emotional than women. However, does that apply to every single person? Probably not. Now, with these overgeneralized beliefs, they can often lead to prejudice. Now, prejudice is the feeling that we get as a result of these overgeneralized beliefs. For example, you might need to promote someone to a senior leadership role. And if the stereotype is that perhaps women are more emotional and we can't have someone that's too emotional in a senior leadership role, the feeling you get where you just feel a little bit uneasy about appointing a woman to that role, that is prejudice. Now, if unmanaged, prejudice can lead to discrimination. And discrimination is the behaviour that we see on the back of stereotypes that lead into prejudice. Discrimination is something from a big picture view that we see all the time. For example, when given the same resume and one has a woman's name on it compared to a man's name, women are judged as less competent and often offered lower salaries than men. Another example is that if, again, the same resume, non-Anglo names on the top of the resume are 40% less likely to be asked in for an interview. And you can see that often these marginalised or minority groups, we have an overgeneralised belief, so we have a stereotype about them that can lead to a prejudice and then discrimination. It's not always these big picture discriminations that we see. More often, it's subtle slights, snubs, remarks that can actually create a huge impact on the person if they're done over and over and over again. Now, these are called microaggressions. So microaggressions can be really impactful. Think of them a little bit more like a paper cut. And when they happen over and over and over again, people can internalise what's been said or done or even not done. Now, the challenge with microaggressions is that often we don't even know that we're doing them. Now, there are different types of microaggressions, and some of them are subconscious, some of them are conscious, and it's often the subconscious ones that get us in trouble. We are trying to do the right thing by the person, but often it's not interpreted that way. As an example, we could say, "Don't take it personally, I'm sure no one meant it that way." Another example is, "Wow, your accent's really improved. It makes you sound more professional." Now, if you think about that from the other person's point of view, what might they be thinking on the back of it? Was I not professional before, and is that due to my accent? You could be thinking, "Oh, am I overthinking this? Am I taking it personally?" You're downplaying my feelings, which are real and valid. So you can see that if this happens over and over and over again, people can actually start to internalise that belief. And when that happens, this is where we see the relationship of these biases that we have to low performance. And in fact, this is what we call the Golem Effect. And it's a well-studied effect where our low expectations of others actually contribute to low performance. People start to internalise their low self-belief. They start to internalise what you're saying, and they live up or live down to those expectations. If I have low expectations of someone, I might not give them as much time. I might not stretch them. I might not give them as many opportunities as I could. But we don't even know that we're doing it. We could judge someone as warm and incompetent, and then they start to live up to that. The good news is on the opposite side of it, there's what we call the Pygmalion Effect. Now, this is where high expectations can lead to high performance, simply by being more curious about the potential of someone and setting expectations that are high. People will live up to that, and we see better performance. Now, in our upcoming podcast, we're going to chat about all of this. We're going to chat about how do you challenge someone if there's microaggressions towards you? How do we become more aware of the stereotypes and the prejudice that we have? How can we actually challenge someone and call a spade without triggering the Golem Effect? And how can we be really direct with feedback and actually trigger the Pygmalion Effect at the same time? So we're going to be exploring all of this and so much more in our upcoming podcast. Can't wait for you to listen in.